In the deepest, most secure dungeons of France, a man lived and died in absolute secrecy. His face was never seen, his voice was never heard, and his identity was a matter of state security. For more than 3 decades, he was transferred from prison to prison, always under the strictest guard, always hidden behind an iron mask. No one knew his name. No records explained why he had been imprisoned. And even after his death, every trace of him was erased. Some whispered that he was a nobleman who had betrayed the king. Others believed he was the king's own brother, locked away to protect the throne. The first whispers of a mysterious prisoner began circulating in France during the late 17th century. This was a time when the absolute power of the French monarchy was at its height. King Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, ruled with an iron grip, controlling every aspect of his kingdom. But behind the extravagant court life of Versailles, in the shadows of the French prison system, a secret was being kept. It was a secret so dangerous that the prisoner involved was locked away in total isolation, hidden behind an iron mask, and placed under constant surveillance by the most trusted guards of the state. The first official mention of the man in the iron mask came from Voltaire, the famous French philosopher and historian. Writing decades after the events, Voltaire described the prisoner as a mysterious, high-ranking captive, one who had been transferred between multiple prisons under the orders of the king. Voltaire claimed that no one was allowed to speak to him, and the punishment for revealing his identity was death. His face, concealed behind a black velvet mask reinforced with metal, was never to be seen. The first known warden to have overseen the prisoner's captivity was a man named Benin d'Auvergne de Saint-Marc, a loyal officer of the French monarchy. From 1669 until 1703, Saint-Marc remained the sole guardian of the masked man, personally escorting him between prisons, ensuring that his isolation remained absolute. At first, the prisoner was held in Pignerol, a remote fortress in what is now Italy. The Pignerol prison was not just a place for criminals. It was where the French monarchy sent high-value political prisoners whose very existence was a threat to the crown. Some of the most notorious figures in France were locked away in Pignerol, including Nicolas Fouquet, a former finance minister who had fallen from the king's favor. Yet even among these high-profile captives, the masked man was treated differently. No other prisoner was kept under such extreme secrecy. By 1681, Saint-Marc was transferred to the fortress of Exilles, bringing the masked prisoner with him. Years later, he was moved again to the infamous Bastille in Paris, where he remained until his final days. Throughout these decades, one thing remained constant. The masked man was never seen, never identified, and never allowed to communicate with the outside world. The fact that King Louis XIV himself was directly involved in his imprisonment suggests that this was not an ordinary criminal. Who was this man? What crime had he committed that required such extreme measures? And why was it so important that no one ever knew his name? For more than 3 decades, the man in the iron mask lived in complete isolation, transferred between some of the most secure prisons in France, under the watchful eye of his personal jailer. Unlike other prisoners, who could at least interact with guards, cellmates, or visitors, the masked man was forbidden from speaking to anyone. Those who came into contact with him were given strict orders: do not speak to the prisoner, do not ask questions, and above all, never attempt to look at his face. The few people who did catch glimpses of him reported that he was always covered, either by a black velvet mask reinforced with metal or, as later accounts suggested, an actual iron mask that concealed his entire identity. Saint-Marc, the man entrusted with the prisoner's fate, followed his orders with absolute loyalty. His letters to government officials revealed just how highly classified this prisoner's existence was. He was not merely a political captive or an enemy of the state. His identity was so dangerous that, if it were ever revealed, it could cause irreparable damage to the monarchy. The masked man was kept in small, windowless cells, cut off from the world. He was provided with basic necessities, and unlike other prisoners, he was treated with an unusual level of respect and care, suggesting that he was no ordinary criminal. His meals were of better quality than what most prisoners received, and he was allowed to walk in secluded areas of the prison, always wearing his mask. The strict secrecy surrounding him raised even more questions. If he was merely a political prisoner, why go to such extreme lengths to hide his identity? Why was Saint-Marc, a high-ranking prison governor, personally overseeing his imprisonment for over 30 years? A handful of prisoners and guards who encountered him later spoke of his presence, though none ever saw his face. A former valet named Eustache d'Orge, who was imprisoned at Pignerol around the same time, allegedly served as the masked man's personal attendant. His job was to bring food to the prisoner and clean his cell, but he was given one chilling warning. If he spoke to the masked man, he would be executed. Even after the prisoner was transferred from Pignerol to Exil, then to Sainte Marguerite, and finally to the Bastille, the restrictions remained unchanged. No one spoke to him, no one saw him unmasked, and when he was moved, he was always the last prisoner transported, under heavy guard, and kept away from all others. Over time, rumors spread throughout France. Some whispered that the masked man was a disgraced nobleman, locked away to silence him forever. Others believed he was a rival to King Louis XIV, someone whose very existence was a threat to the throne. Some even speculated that he was a twin brother of the king, hidden away to prevent any challenge to royal authority. The secrecy surrounding him only deepened upon his death in 1703. Unlike other prisoners, whose names were recorded and whose possessions were inventoried, the man in the Iron Mask's entire existence was erased. His personal belongings were burned, his cell was scrubbed clean, and his burial was carried out in complete secrecy. Whoever he was, the French monarchy wanted to make sure that no one would ever know the truth. But despite their efforts, the mystery did not die with him. Instead, it grew larger, leading to centuries of speculation, conspiracy theories, and the search for the masked man's true identity. For centuries, the true identity of the man in the Iron Mask has been one of history's most debated mysteries. Who was this man, and why was his existence so dangerous that he needed to be erased from the world? Why did King Louis XIV, a ruler known for his absolute control, fear this prisoner so much that he condemned him to lifelong secrecy and isolation? From the moment his story became public, theories have multiplied. Some believed he was a disgraced noble. Others whispered that he was a powerful political enemy silenced by the crown, while the most shocking theories suggested he was a member of the royal family itself, perhaps even the king's own brother. Despite the secrecy surrounding him, there were clues: accounts from prison guards, hints in letters written by officials, and statements from witnesses who had caught brief glimpses of the masked prisoner. Over time, historians have pieced together several leading theories, but none have ever been definitively proven. One of the most conventional theories suggests that the masked prisoner was a high-ranking noble or government official who had fallen out of favor with the monarchy. Nobles who were once powerful could be imprisoned without trial if they were suspected of conspiring against the king. The Bastille and other state prisons held countless individuals who had been deemed a threat to the monarchy. Among the most commonly suspected figures was Nicolas Fouquet, the former Minister of Finance under King Louis XIV. Fouquet had been a trusted advisor but was eventually accused of embezzling state funds. Some believed he had blackmail material on the king, secrets so damaging that he had to be removed. However, Fouquet's imprisonment is well documented, and he died in captivity in 1680, long before the man in the Iron Mask passed away in 1703. If Fouquet had secrets, they died with him. Another theory suggests that the masked man was Eustache d'Orge, a mysterious prisoner who was held at the same time as the masked man and had similar restrictions placed on him. d'Orge was believed to be a valet with knowledge of political corruption at the highest levels, possibly including secret dealings between France and England. Some believe his name was a cover and he was actually a nobleman or government official. But even if d'Orge was connected to the mystery, he was not important enough to justify a 3-decade-long imprisonment with such extreme security. The man in the Iron Mask was someone far more dangerous, someone whose very identity posed a threat to the state. The most famous and controversial theory is that the masked prisoner was a hidden brother of King Louis XIV, possibly a twin. This theory first gained traction through the writings of Voltaire, the French philosopher and historian, who claimed that the prisoner was an unnamed brother of the king, locked away to prevent him from challenging Louis XIV's rule. The idea of a secret royal sibling was not unprecedented. In the age of absolute monarchy, royal bloodlines were carefully controlled. The idea that a twin brother of the king could exist and challenge the throne was a nightmare for any ruling monarch. If Louis XIV had a twin, it would explain why the prisoner was treated with unusual respect, why his identity was so closely guarded, and why his face could never be seen. If such a brother had lived, his very existence could have sparked a civil war over succession. The strongest argument supporting this theory is that his imprisonment lasted for more than 30 years, spanning multiple prison transfers, always under the same guard. Only someone of extreme importance would warrant such long-term secrecy. But if he was a twin brother, why wasn't he simply killed? If Louis XIV had a twin who posed a threat, why go through the trouble of keeping him alive for decades under such strict conditions? Some theorists argue that the masked man's lineage prevented his execution. Killing royal blood was considered a grave sin, and keeping him locked away was the only alternative. Others point out that no official royal birth records mention a second child, making the twin theory difficult to prove. Yet the secrecy surrounding royal births was common in the era, and some believe that any record of a second child could have been deliberately destroyed. Another possibility is that the man in the iron mask was not a twin brother, but an illegitimate son of the king. King Louis XIV was notorious for his many mistresses, and illegitimate children were often acknowledged but kept away from political power. However, if this particular child was the product of a scandalous affair involving a noblewoman or a foreign princess, his existence could have been a major political threat. If he had a claim to the throne, even a weak one, Louis XIV might have seen him as a potential rival. Keeping him alive but hidden would have ensured that no one could use him as a puppet to overthrow the king. Some records suggest that the masked man was well educated, spoke multiple languages, and was treated with more dignity than an ordinary prisoner. This would make sense if he had been raised as royalty before being imprisoned. But like the twin theory, there is no direct evidence linking the masked man to the royal bloodline. All that remains are whispers, scattered records, and the extreme lengths taken to conceal his identity. What makes the man in the iron mask such an enduring mystery is that his story is unlike any other in history. Many kings imprisoned rivals and political enemies, but few went to such extraordinary lengths to ensure that a prisoner remained completely anonymous. The fact that no official records of his identity exist suggests that his imprisonment was not just about punishment, it was about erasure. Someone, likely King Louis XIV himself, wanted to make sure that history never knew this man's name. Whether he was a noble, a political enemy, or a hidden member of the royal family, he was considered too dangerous to ever be free. And despite the secrecy surrounding him, his legend has only grown over the centuries. Writers, historians, and conspiracy theorists continue to search for answers, hoping that somewhere, buried in forgotten archives or hidden within royal correspondence, the truth still exists. If it does, it has remained hidden for over 300 years. Among all the theories surrounding the man in the iron mask, none is more controversial, intriguing, or enduring than the idea that he was a secret brother of King Louis XIV, possibly even his twin. The idea of a hidden sibling locked away from the world is not just a dramatic tale. It is a theory that has been seriously considered by historians and conspiracy theorists alike. The theory that the masked prisoner was the brother of King Louis XIV gained widespread attention thanks to Voltaire, the famous French philosopher and historian. In his writings, Voltaire claimed that the masked man was a royal prisoner, someone whose identity was so sensitive that he was hidden away for decades, never to be spoken of. Voltaire's account stated that the prisoner was treated with great care and respect, unlike ordinary criminals. This suggested that he was of noble blood, possibly even a lost prince. But Voltaire went even further. He wrote that the prisoner was the older brother of King Louis XIV, possibly his twin. This idea sent shockwaves through France, as it implied that the true heir to the throne had been imprisoned, while Louis XIV had taken his place as king. To understand this theory, we must look at the birth of King Louis XIV. Louis was born in 1638, after years of his parents struggling to have children. His father, King Louis XIII, and his mother, Anne of Austria, had been married for more than 20 years without producing an heir. Then, suddenly, Anne became pregnant at age 37, an age considered risky for childbirth at the time. According to the twin theory, Anne did not give birth to just one son, but two. The existence of a second son would have created an enormous political crisis. France followed Salic law, which meant that the throne could only be passed to a legitimate male heir. If twins were born and the question of who was the eldest became uncertain, it could have split the monarchy into factions, leading to civil war. To avoid this, some believe Cardinal Mazarin and other high-ranking officials covered up the birth of a second son. The weaker or less favored twin, or the one who was born second, would have been quietly removed, placed in the care of loyal royal servants, and eventually locked away for life. If true, this means that the man in the Iron Mask was the rightful heir to the throne. But Louis XIV, who became one of the most powerful monarchs in history, would never allow a rival claimant to exist. One of the biggest arguments against this theory is the question: if Louis XIV had a twin brother, why didn't he just have him killed? The most likely answer is that, as a royal, the masked man's death could have sparked a political scandal or rebellion. Killing a legitimate son of a king, even one who was hidden from the world, might have caused suspicion. If rumors spread, rival factions could have used his death as an excuse to challenge Louis XIV's rule. By keeping him alive but imprisoned, Louis ensured that his brother could never be used as a political weapon, while also preventing the nobility from questioning why he had been executed. The fact that the masked prisoner was treated better than other captives, given good food, and never tortured supports this idea. He was kept alive not for his own sake, but to protect the legitimacy of the Sun King's rule. There are no official royal documents confirming that Anne of Austria gave birth to twins. However, secrecy was common in royal births. Some believe that any mention of a second child was deliberately erased from history, either by King Louis XIV himself or by his advisors. What makes this theory even more intriguing is that the prisoner's treatment matches what we would expect if he were of royal blood. He was always kept in isolated luxury, never treated as a common criminal. He was moved between high-security prisons, always under the same guard. His identity was considered a matter of national security. All of this suggests that he was not just an ordinary noble or a disgraced official, but someone whose existence alone could threaten the monarchy itself. An alternative version of the theory suggests that the man in the Iron Mask was not Louis XIV's twin, but instead his illegitimate half-brother. King Louis XIII was known for his cold relationship with Anne of Austria. Some historians believe that Anne may have had an affair with Cardinal Mazarin, the powerful Prime Minister of France. If the child was the product of this affair, he could never be allowed to rule. However, since he was still of royal blood, executing him could have caused a scandal. Instead, he would have been kept in total secrecy, ensuring that no one ever discovered the truth. Despite the persistence of the twin theory, there is no concrete evidence that Louis XIV had a brother. However, certain details, such as the prisoner's exceptional treatment, the secrecy of his records, and the length of his imprisonment, continue to fuel speculation. If he were just another political prisoner, why did he need to be erased completely from history? And why did Louis XIV personally ensure that no one would ever see his face? The lack of answers only makes the mystery stronger. If there were ever any official records confirming his identity, they were either lost or deliberately destroyed. While the theory of the man in the Iron Mask being a lost royal brother is the most famous, some historians believe he was not a member of the monarchy at all, but rather a powerful political figure who knew too much. France in the 17th century was a dangerous place for those who opposed the king. Under the rule of King Louis XIV, any individual who posed a threat to his authority could be imprisoned or executed. However, some men were too important to be simply killed. Their knowledge was too dangerous, their secrets too valuable. The idea that the masked prisoner was a high-ranking political enemy of the king is supported by the extreme secrecy surrounding him. If he were just another noble, why go to such extraordinary lengths to conceal his identity for over 30 years? If the king feared what this man could reveal, then keeping him alive but permanently silenced would have been the safest option. One of the strongest candidates for the man in the Iron Mask is Nicolas Fouquet, the former Minister of Finance under Louis XIV. Fouquet was once one of the most powerful men in France. As the king's finance minister, he controlled the flow of money within the kingdom, making him an incredibly influential figure. However, his ambition eventually became his downfall. Fouquet had built himself a lavish palace, the Château de Vaux-le-Vicomte, which rivaled even the king's own estate. He hosted extravagant parties, entertained the nobility, and gathered a powerful network of allies. Louis XIV saw this as an open challenge to his rule. No one in France was supposed to outshine the Sun King. In 1661, Louis XIV had Fouquet arrested. The trial that followed was one of the most dramatic in French history. Fouquet was accused of embezzlement, corruption, and conspiring against the king. However, many believed that his true crime was knowing too much. Fouquet had been in charge of the king's financial records, meaning he knew about every secret transaction, every bribe, and every hidden deal within the government. He had knowledge that could have exposed the corruption at the heart of the monarchy. Louis XIV could not allow such a man to be free. At the end of his trial, Fouquet was sentenced to life in prison, locked away in Pignerol, the same prison where the man in the Iron Mask was later kept. This is where the theory takes a strange turn. Fouquet officially died in 1680, yet some believe this was a cover-up. Could it be that Fouquet was not killed, but instead placed in total isolation, his identity erased, and his face covered forever to ensure he never revealed the secrets he knew? Another candidate is Eustache Doge, a mysterious figure who was imprisoned at the same time as the masked man. Doge's name appears in official documents, yet almost nothing is known about him. Some historians believe that Doge was a false identity given to protect the true nature of the prisoner. What little we do know suggests that Doge may have been involved in a high-level scandal or conspiracy. One theory suggests that Doge was a valet who overheard classified information, perhaps involving state secrets, illegal dealings, or even a royal scandal. Saint-Mars, the warden of the masked prisoner, once wrote that Doge had committed a crime so terrible that he could never be released. This aligns with the restrictions placed on the man in the Iron Mask. If he was someone who had heard a secret so dangerous that he could never be allowed to speak again, his imprisonment makes sense. Some historians believe that the man in the Iron Mask was imprisoned because he knew something that could destroy the monarchy. There were many dark secrets hidden within the French royal court, scandals involving affairs, illegitimate heirs, and even assassination plots. One theory suggests that the masked man knew the truth about Louis XIV's parentage, that the Sun King was not actually the biological son of King Louis XIII. If someone had proof that Louis XIV had no rightful claim to the throne, it could have caused a massive rebellion. In this case, the masked man would have been kept alive, but silenced forever. If the man in the Iron Mask had simply been a political prisoner, why not just kill him? The answer may lie in his importance. If he was a nobleman or a high-ranking official, executing him could have raised too many questions. His allies may have demanded an explanation, and his death could have triggered political unrest. By hiding him away and covering his face, Louis XIV ensured that he would never be recognized or used as a figurehead for rebellion. The unusual treatment of the prisoner also suggests that he was someone powerful enough to be dangerous, but not dangerous enough to be executed outright. Both theories, the royal twin theory and the political prisoner theory, explain why the man in the Iron Mask was held in such extreme secrecy. The key difference is who he was and what made him dangerous. If he was a secret brother of the king, his imprisonment was about protecting the royal bloodline and ensuring there was no challenger to the throne. If he was a political prisoner, he was locked away because he knew something the king could not allow to be revealed. Both theories make sense, and both are supported by fragments of historical evidence. But neither has ever been fully proven. The fact that no official records exist confirming his true identity suggests that someone went to great lengths to erase him from history. After more than 3 decades of captivity, the man in the Iron Mask met his end in the most fitting way possible, in silence, in secrecy, and with his true identity still unknown. His final years were spent in the Bastille, one of France's most infamous prisons, where he was kept under the personal watch of Bénigne d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, the same warden who had overseen his imprisonment for years. Despite being transferred between multiple prisons over the decades, the masked prisoner had always remained under Saint-Mar's control, a fact that only deepens the mystery surrounding his identity. On November 19, 1703, the man in the iron mask died in his cell. Official records state that he was buried the next day under the name Marchioli in the Saint-Paul cemetery in Paris. But even in death, his identity was protected. His name was an alias, and no one was allowed to see his body before burial. But the secrecy surrounding him did not end there. The moment he died, extreme measures were taken to erase his existence entirely. Everything he owned, his clothing, his furniture, even the walls of his prison cell, was destroyed or scrubbed clean. His possessions were burned, and any records containing information about him were either locked away or vanished completely. Even his cell was completely stripped down and repainted, as if to remove any trace that he had ever lived there. If he had simply been an ordinary prisoner, such measures would have been unnecessary. This was something far more deliberate, a calculated effort to ensure that no clues were left behind. The man had been silenced in life, and now he was being erased in death. But why? The death of the man in the iron mask should have brought closure to his story, but instead, it only made the mystery even stronger. If he had been just another prisoner, why did the French government go to such extraordinary lengths to erase him? If his identity was so dangerous that it had to be hidden even after he died, what secret was he carrying? Rumors spread throughout France, and soon the mystery took on a life of its own. People began to suspect that the truth about his identity had been covered up, and that whatever secret he had died with was still powerful enough to threaten the monarchy, even from beyond the grave. Years later, former guards from the Bastille spoke about the prisoner in hushed whispers. Some claimed that he was treated with a level of care and respect that no other prisoner received. Unlike most captives, who were locked away in filth and squalor, the man in the iron mask had been well fed, given clean clothes, and kept in a separate cell away from the general population. One guard, decades later, even claimed that Louis XIV himself had personally ordered the prisoner's treatment. This further fueled speculation that he had been a member of the royal family, someone whose very existence posed a danger to the monarchy. If this was true, then his death may have been the final act in a long cover-up, ensuring that the truth would never be discovered. Officially, the man in the iron mask was buried at Saint-Paul cemetery, but this raises another question. Was he really buried there? In the years following his death, no one could find his grave. No marker was placed, and there were no witnesses to the burial. Some believe that his body was secretly moved, possibly taken to an undisclosed location so that no one could ever exhume it and prove his identity. Others think that the name Marchioli was a deliberate misdirection, a way to prevent anyone from connecting him to his true past. If his identity was tied to the royal family or a major political scandal, then it's likely that his remains were destroyed or hidden permanently. Whatever the case, the location of his body, just like his name, remains a mystery. Centuries have passed since the man in the iron mask drew his final breath in the Bastille, yet his legend remains as powerful as ever. Unlike most prisoners who vanish into obscurity, he has only grown more famous over time, his story woven into the fabric of history, literature, and conspiracy theories. The reason is simple: his identity was never revealed. The secrecy surrounding him was so extreme, the efforts to erase him so deliberate, that it left behind an even greater mystery. Who was he? Why did Louis XIV go to such extraordinary lengths to silence him? And what secret was so dangerous that it had to be buried forever? Even today, historians, researchers, and theorists continue to search for answers, driven by the idea that somewhere, hidden in forgotten archives or lost records, the truth still exists. Theories about the man in the iron mask have evolved over time, but they have never faded. Some remain convinced that he was a royal, possibly the twin brother or illegitimate sibling of King Louis XIV, locked away to prevent a challenge to the throne. Others argue that he was a powerful political prisoner, someone who had uncovered a secret that could have destroyed the monarchy, perhaps knowledge of royal corruption, an assassination plot, or even evidence that Louis XIV was not the rightful king. Despite endless speculation, no definitive proof has ever been found. The French government has never released any classified documents confirming his identity, and the records that do exist offer only fragments of information, as if someone long ago ensured that the full truth would never be known. Voltaire, the famous French philosopher, was one of the first to popularize the mystery, writing about the masked prisoner in the 18th century. He was the one who first suggested the idea that the prisoner had been the king's own brother, an idea that would later take on a life of its own. But it was Alexandre Dumas, the legendary author of The Three Musketeers, who truly immortalized the mystery. Dumas's version was a work of fiction, but it was so compelling that it shaped public perception for centuries. Many people today still believe the twin theory, thanks in part to his novel. Since then, the story has been retold, reimagined, and reinterpreted countless times in books, films, and television series. Beyond the thrill of the unknown, the story of the man in the iron mask speaks to something deeper about history and power. It reminds us that even in an era where kings ruled absolutely, there were still secrets too dangerous to be known. It forces us to ask, what else has been erased from history? If an entire man, someone significant enough to be imprisoned in total secrecy for over 30 years, could be wiped from existence, then what other stories have been buried, lost, or deliberately concealed? The man in the iron mask is more than just a mystery. He is a symbol of the hidden truths that lie beneath history's surface. Many historians believe that if the answer exists, it lies in lost documents, hidden letters, or undiscovered royal archives. Over the years, some researchers have uncovered hints, small pieces of forgotten evidence, inconsistencies in royal records, and secret correspondences that suggest the truth is still out there. But after 3 centuries, is it even possible to know for certain? The reality is, unless some long-lost letter or diary is discovered, the identity of the man in the iron mask may remain one of history's greatest secrets. Perhaps this is why his story remains so compelling. The search for truth is ongoing, and as long as the question remains unanswered, the legend will never die. The man in the iron mask has haunted history for over 3 centuries. His identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time, a prisoner so dangerous that his very existence had to be erased. Even after his death, the French government went to extreme lengths to destroy all traces of his existence. His belongings were burned, his cell was wiped clean, and his body was buried in an unmarked grave, ensuring that no one would ever learn the truth. Yet, despite their efforts, his legend only grew stronger. He has been immortalized in books, films, and endless speculation, becoming more than just a forgotten prisoner. He is a symbol of the secrets that rulers take to their graves. Could the truth still be out there, hidden in lost documents or forgotten archives? Or has it been permanently erased, sealed away like the man himself?